Welcome back to A Fine Time for Healing. I am your show host, Randi Fine. A Fine Time for Healing is a place where your physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being are all that matter. Are you an alienated parent, or do you know someone that is? Are you an alienated grandparent, or know someone that is? Do you even know what parental alienation is? Today, you're going to learn about this horrific trend that is happening all over the globe and just destroying the lives of families and children and parents and everything like that. And today we have with us somebody who knows this firsthand. Um, David R. Shubert is a left behind and alienated parent who has been fighting to be in his daughter and stepson's lives for over 15 years now. He understands the dynamics involved in the mental and emotional aspects that all alienated parents are forced to endure. After becoming disillusioned with the family courts, he decided to take matters into his own hands to promote awareness on the various social media outlets. And now he has a blog and a book that we're going to talk about because this is very recent. Dave has been supporting people through this for many, many years. Good morning, Dave. Welcome.
Good morning. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Very well, and thank you for having me on your show this morning.
Sure. My pleasure. Um, so I've known you for a long time, Dave. We've been back and forth, and I know that this is a passion of yours because it really hits close to home. So tell us your story basically in your words.
Well, like everybody, I wound up meeting and getting roped into the wrong person to have in my life. And after about 6 years of marriage, this person, um, without warning, abducted both my stepson, who I had been raising since he was a toddler, but also my biological daughter, and fled overseas to another country. Now, when that first happened back in 2007, I really didn't know what to do, much like most parents. I mean, how do we get our children back? And I remember when it first occurred, I called up the police, the sheriff's department, actually, and I told them when I found out that they were leaving the country, I said, hey, you guys need to get over to the airport with Denver International Airport. And if you've ever flown in there, it's very large. And what they told me standing in my living room, they says, you know what, even if we did get lucky enough to find your wife and your children, there's nothing we can do about it. I said, what do you mean there's nothing you can do about it? They said, well, she could tell us that she has a constitutional right as the mother to take her children on vacation, and you can't stop me. Well, I told him, I said, that's not true. I said, there is no divorce proceedings. There is no court orders that allowing her to do this. Do your job. They said, we can't. Well, I found out a few months later that was not true. Law enforcement are not trained in areas of how to negotiate with these kind of situations. They're used to bank robbers. They're used to, uh, other types of crimes, things like that, but not when it comes to family laws in cases of parental abductions. So, anyways, finally, about 4 months into this, after they'd already been gone, I did learn I did have certain rights to bring my children back. And through the assistance of the Office of Children's Issue, who is part of the U.S. Department of State, an application was lodged with the Hague Convention, which doesn't do just criminal courts for these international leaders. It also involves the aspect of children who have been wrongfully abducted by a parent and taken overseas. So we lodged that. It took 13 months of fighting internationally. But what had happened was I got an order of return in December of 2008. I'm ecstatic. But the ex wife, by then, she filed an appeal, which she was later on, it was denied. and that took an additional 5 months. So I was out of the children's lives for a total of 16 months during that process. But by the time they did make it back to the United States, it didn't grant me custody. It just says, hey, the children were wrongfully removed. This order needs to be held in, or this situation needs to be held in the family courts of where the children were raised. So they come back. By then, it'd been exactly 2 years to the month of how long the children had been gone. The judge, in my case, swept aside every piece of damning evidence against my ex-wife, from the abduction and everything else, the threat of mine never seeing or talking to the children again unless I paid her a certain amount of money, bought her a car, and the list goes on and on. Well, he goes, well, it concerns me about this, but I have misgivings about that. However, and in the end, he goes, "What? It's in the children's best interest because they've been gone so long. I'm going to let the mother keep the children and return to the country where they were just ordered from." I, when that happened, I slapped my hand so hard in my forehead, I think the people down the hall heard it, because and I just shook my head, going, what was this judge thinking? What was he drinking in his water that morning? Was he on drugs that he did this? Because I knew the moment he issued those orders, she was going to fulfill her threat of me never having any contact with the children, and she was going to get the children to forget who I am. That happened. I was right. We later on, because she disobeyed every order, not just one or two, but every order the court issued her when given that second chance. We had 4 contempt hearings, which she never bothered to appear even over the phone, and she was notified about them. We finally went into modification in, I believe it was October of 2011. They wound up reversing their prior orders and awarding me sole custody of the children, of both of them, not just my biological, but my stepson also, because I was deemed psychological parent of him. She was ordered to bring the children back. However, much like the other orders that she was issued, she failed to obey this one as well. So I was still back at square one. I had on paper custody orders, but yet I didn't have my children. And so the alienation from the day that they had left in 2009 was in full force. And I don't know what the children were being told about them, the lies, the manipulation, false implanting of memories that never happened. I don't know. I know that the alienation was there, and it was a severe aspect of it.
So for those who don't know what parental alienation is, can you just give us a brief definition or summary of it?
You betcha. And I'll define both aspects. Parental alienation is where one parent will do everything in their power through lies, manipulation, as I mentioned, the implanting of false memories, bad mouthing the other parent, whatever it takes to turn the child away from the target parent, or even try to get them to forget who they are. Now, a left behind parent is someone whose former spouse or partner abducted the children and took them to another jurisdiction. And that could be across town, it could be across state lines, it could be internationally. So that's the difference. Parental alienation, left behind parents. Basically, on that, most times alienation comes into play. And when it does, it's a much more severe case of it.
I can't imagine what going through something that you went through, and and what you learn as you go through this process is there's really no legal support for the victim of this. There's you can't make these alienators do anything, or these left behind parents do anything, these abductors. It's real hard, and I know you're still pushing this.
Well, I am. I'm pushing the issue. Now, my daughter, she did find me because of all my postings I do on social media. They were not just helping me to heal inside when I would write my reflection articles, but at the same time, they were showing support and solidarity for all alienated and left behind parents. But the third part of that is it was a way of leaving breadcrumbs on the internet. Well, by doing that, excuse me, by doing that, my daughter one day became curious about me, and she reached out to me through Facebook and says, I think I'm your daughter. Well, much probably like you, we get a lot of crank type messages on social media,
Mhm.
and it's like, right. If you are, I'm going to ask you a series of questions that only my daughter would have the answer to, and I did, and she answered each of them correctly. And I knew it wasn't one of these trolls that are out there trying to mess with my head. Because let's face it, them trolls, their main goal is to cause chaos and heartache. But in my case, with this situation, my daughter had found me, and I was ecstatic. We carried on conversations via Facebook Messenger, but she had to be very careful because her mother was monitoring her activities. That I would later find out anyway. So the time came. She messaged me and says, "Hey, I'd like to come back to the United States. Can you help me?" Of course. I mean, what am I going to say? I mean, it's like a dream come true after all those years. I knew I had sole custody, in the court orders of Colorado, and that allowed me to go ahead and write up a letter, get her plane tickets, and I made sure that she had all this stuff with her. Boom, she was on a plane like lickety split, and she got back here. You know, so that was a nice thing, but you have to understand after years of alienation and mental and emotional abuse that is put upon our children, I'm not going to lie, there's issues. It affects them. And she's no different.
Right. So it really wasn't all you hoped it would be, although I know you approached her arrival with some skepticism because you really weren't sure what you were going to get. Because, working with parents for so many years, you understand what happens to these children. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about an alienation. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a narcissistic abuse expert and coach, and so what I see in with alienation is pretty much there's a narcissistic parent who wants to win or beat the other parent at the game and basically destroy them. And when they lose control over their spouse, because that spouse is now leaving them, they have to do something to control them. And so they weaponize their children
Mm-hmm.
and they use them to fight this battle. And it's very, very sad isn't even the word because it destroys parents to lose these children. And generally, the abductor is the abuser, and the parent fighting to keep the kid is the good parent who's sacrificed everything to love those children. Has that been your experience, Dave?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I get some people that come out and claim to be the victim, and after a number of conversations, I find out that's not the case. That they just happen to get caught, and now when their children are now with the target parent, and per the court orders, now they're going, well, I was wronged and I'm the victim, and my child is like, no, if you really loved your child, you would have done one thing: allow your child to know and love both parents. But that doesn't happen, unfortunately.
Mm, it doesn't. And this has been a problem that has gone on for a very, very long time. And it is an international problem. It's an
Mhm.
issue everywhere. And it seems as if the courts and the therapists, and maybe even there's most attorneys, I know there are there's judges and therapists and attorneys who specialize in this and get it. But for the most part, we're going to just say for the most part, they don't know what they're looking at when they see it, do they?
No, they don't. The judges, especially, they're not educated in what parental alienation is. They just have heard the term. And the thing about with the courts, with these judges, even though they're not educated on what it really involves, they hate the word parental alienation because they think it demonizes or whatever the other parent, and it doesn't. Parental alienation, they like to now use hostile, aggressive parenting or gatekeeper or whatever these fancy terms are that they choose for that moment. And that's not the way it is. They need to go back and dust off their dictionary and pull up the word parental and then look up alienation. Put them both together, and they'll find out that parental alienation, the term of it, is exactly what they need to be recognizing. Now, the funny thing is about the courts also is that I blame them almost as much as I blame the alienator for what's happening. And the reason I say that is that these judges are meant to take an oath of office when they go in there. And I'll read you exactly what their oath is. Because it says, each justice or judge of the United States shall take the following oath or affirmation before performing the duties of his office. It says, I, so and so, do solemnly swear that I will administer justice without respect to persons and do equal right to the poor and to the rich, and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon me under the Constitution and laws of the United States. So help me God. Now, they also take a code of conduct where they can uh, state that they will perform the duties of the office fairly, impartially, and diligently. Unfortunately, not all judges take their oath serious, nor do they follow that code of conduct. Because if they did, we wouldn't be having these problems that we do now. Don't get me wrong, there's some great judges out there, that do believe in the unity and sanctity of families. But there's a lot more of them that, it's just a job to them, and they bring their biases and prejudices and idiotic ways of thinking into the courtroom, and they're destroying families. And then
Yes,
they
yeah.
use as best interest standards as nothing more than hollow words to take up empty spaces on a court order.
And they often side with the parent that they like better. So the alienator is usually someone who is able to charm the judge or put on an act of being the ideal parent. And they look really good. And generally, the targeted parent is upset and they don't look
Mm-hmm.
so good. They're not presenting as well. And
Mm-hmm.
judges have this docket all day long. They got one after the other after the other. And so you don't really get their full attention. They just want to get through the case, make a decision. But most of the time they get it wrong. And so do the other officers of the court, like the GALs, the guardian ad litems, the parent coordinators, and um, all the people that are supposed to help, even child protective services. They all tend to get it wrong, don't they, Dave?
They do, because like you say, they've all got their own biases and prejudices and lack of knowledge in the cases, and like you say, they want to get through the situation with expediency. That means rushing through it. And that's why I've always pounded my fist on my desk saying we need to take family courts into the same area as what criminal courts are conducted. And that means that if you say something in the court, make an accusation, whatever, you better be prepared to back it up with hard evidence. If not, it's going to be tossed out. You could be charged with perjury, could result in a fine, could result in jail time, could be a combination of both. But instead, family courts go by the old adage of he or she who lies first is believed. And I know that these narcissists, people with other underlying mental health issues, they know how to lie. They're great actors, you know, and hell, they could go to you and in a closed-in room and say, you know what, today the sky is purple, and without even thinking or checking, you're going to believe them,
Hmm.
you know. And so that's what these judges do. It's like, well, I'm not mandating that they tell the truth, but I'm going to believe them because you know what? Hey, that's a nice looking woman, or hey, that's a handsome man. I like the sound of their voices. I like the way they're looking at me. You know,
Right.
they're human.
Yeah, and this is where the attorney comes in, because you have to have an attorney that understands this choreography in the court and is prepared. Because what I've learned is that going to court against a narcissist, an alienator, any of those, um, it's about strategy, not about law.
It is. It's also, about how they interact with the judge. Now, I know my last attorney that I have, um, my the one before that, who did a miserable job. I didn't have the money at the time, and what had happened was I wound up finding the cheapest attorney I could, unfortunately, off of Craigslist. Never go with a Craigslist attorney. I found that one out. And when he did such a bad job, I wound up finding ways to get the money. It cost me a lot more in the end, but it worked out well. What I did is I found someone who had a low law license, someone who'd been practicing in front of these judges in my area for a number of years, someone who had knowledge of family law in the way that was needed. For further, he also knew how to present the case to the judge in such of a manner as that the mother, in this case, and I'm not blaming just mothers because fathers do the same stuff.
Right.
Okay, but in my case, showed that the mother was not going to obey any of the orders, was not going to do what was in the best interest of the children. And he basically talked to the judge like he was sitting across the table having coffee with her, like friends. And that was a good way for him to go ahead and talk to her. She responded and says, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and reverse this. You've got sole custody of both the kids. I hope wish you the best of luck in getting them back
You know,
here.
for those who are watching and are confused about the court system, the family court system is not part of the U.S. judicial system. You don't have the same rights in these courts. And you have no right to a jury trial. The judge is the judge, jury, executioner. They make the decision. And if they're having a bad day or they're swayed or whatever, it can go really bad. And I always tell people, one of the first things I do is I evaluate. Tell me about your lawyer, because I can tell immediately if the lawyer gets it or they don't get it. And there's many lawyers who will not admit to not being equipped to handle something like this, and they take it on. And then when they realize they're in over their head, then they tell the client, you just need to settle. This isn't going to happen for you. This isn't working. You need to settle. And then, the person does not get the advice and support that they need. So there are attorneys throughout the United States, and I would imagine throughout the world, that specialize in this. And you must have this kind of attorney. Most people, Dave, go the cheap route first, thinking they're going to save money. It costs you more in the long run.
It does. And the reason it costs you more is number one, they're trying to figure out things as they go along instead of already having that knowledge in at their fingertips. The other thing is that, okay, I'm only charging my client $250 an hour. How do I extend that so I can make more money? So what they do is that they will purposely extend their time with you, extend when the next court dates are, and try to get more court dates and things like that, instead of spending that extra money and getting someone who knows how to do their job, that believes in their client, believes in helping their client, especially the children. You know, going with a cheap lawyer, yeah, I don't recommend that,
Mm-hmm.
because it will cost you more in time and especially money.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly. And often it is, like in your case, the attorney is the one that explains this to the judge because it needs to be explained. They don't necessarily get it. And even if they've heard it before, every case needs to be explained in terms of um, this kind of manipulation and hostage taking and brainwashing and all of that. It's just awful. Uh, so I know that you just started a blog. What is your blog called?
A parenting affair. We're still in the infancy stages of it, and we're still adding to it, but it's getting there. But it just takes time, and between everything, between the YouTube channel, the social media, the blog, and the book, and getting ready to start another book here soon, my hands are pretty much full, so I can't donate 100% of my time every single day just to the blog.
Right, I get it. I know. Nowadays you have to be everywhere all at once, and it's very difficult if you don't have a team. I don't have a team. I have to do it all. And yeah, you can, something's going to suffer if you devote it in one direction. Tell us about your book.
The book actually is called Stolen Memories. Now, the funny part about that is, like, when I came up with that title, I thought, oh, great. I've got a catchy title. It's actually the two words speak the truth, because when you don't have your children, those are memories that were never created. So they were stolen from you. And it wasn't until after I wrote the book and published it, I happened to do some searching. There were like three or four other books of the same title or very similar to it. I'm like, oh, crud. So when they search my book on Amazon, they have to put my name in there, David Shubert, Stolen Memories. But what it is, it's a memoir book detailing from the time, over a 20-year period, when I met my former wife, raising her son, from the time he was just under 2 years old until he was about eight and a half, a little over 8 years old, I should say, and then the birth of my daughter and things like that. Unlike a lot of memoirs that are out there where they try to keep their images squeaky clean, I wasn't about to do that, because none of us are perfect. I put the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in there, including things about myself that I'm not exactly proud of. But I mean, I wasn't a horrible person, but I felt it important to know the person that's putting out the story. But also in my book, I also put in something there I don't think anyone else does: actual court orders, actual things, what I said in court, emails, though I had to change the names and the email addresses, for certain purposes. But I put all that in there so it adds credibility that, hey, he's not embellishing. He's actually telling the truth about this stuff, and so yeah, we launched that a few weeks ago as far as publishing, and seems to be going along pretty good. People are receptive of it.
That's great. That's great. So did you ever adopt her son?
No, I would have liked to eventually, but there was something off about her. And I noticed about a year into our relationship of living together, I'd started noticing that she had anger issues. She had extreme mood swings, all this stuff. I mean, I never knew. I mean, I remember, as an example, it was a Valentine's Day. We were going to go out to a Valentine's Day party. and this is how volatile she could be. I was already dressed. We'd already made arrangements for her son. She was upstairs in the bathroom putting on her makeup and was having a nice conversation, and all of a sudden it was like a light switch. And she went from having a nice conversation to yelling and screaming at me. It's like, what in the heck just happened here? Needless to say, that evening was ruined, and the longer it went on, the more often she would have her mood switch, the more angry she'd become, the longer it would last. Actually, towards the end, I could not go a single day without her yelling and screaming at me, calling me names, and it would last for 2 and 3 weeks nonstop, you know. And I remember I had asked her when in the beginning, I said, I'm not a doctor. I don't proclaim to, but I looked it up on the internet, about what's happening. I said, I'd like to see if you'd consider talking to a therapist because I think you may be bipolar. Oof, wrong thing to say. She's going up the stairs. She's screaming at me, I'm not crazy, and calling me names again. And that lasted for about a week, and it's like, I don't think I'm going to bring that topic up again,
You can't
you
tell
know.
them that there's anything wrong with them because they literally cannot see it. They can't see that anything's wrong with them. So it doesn't, there's no point in telling them who they are or what you've discovered they are because they're not going to get it. That's for your, and you learned. It's really for your knowledge only. But no, it's narcissism. And what she did on Valentine's Day was, and this is something all narcissists do, they sabotage events. So here you were, everything was ready to go, and she had to sabotage it and ruin it.
Right.
That's
And
why
she
it
did that
came out
with
of.
and she did that with 2/3 of our holidays.
Mhm, absolutely, they do that. They do that. They sabotage everything, and it's difficult as an adult to deal with that. But when they do this to children, and children are anticipating something, expecting something, a trip or whatever it is, and then their world comes crashing down because the parent says, "Well, you don't deserve it. You aren't good, and you don't deserve it, and that's why we're not doing it," or whatever. And they always blame either the partner, the spouse, or the children for the fact that they are deliberately sabotaging the event.
Right. And I kind of relate that to in such of a way as it goes back to the control issues.
Mhm,
That they want to control, because these people, they want to control every aspect of their life and everyone in it,
mhm.
from their home, their children, to their spouse, to their work environments. And so in controlling these people in their life, it's not just physically controlling them, it's controlling them mentally and emotionally. And that can start while you're together, the mental and emotional control. Now, when we look at that, we meet someone. And I've talked to a lot of folks over the years, and, they always ask themselves the question, did I do something wrong? Did I deserve it? Why is this person that I once loved and said they love me doing these things to me? And, am I to blame? And it's like, no, don't be embarrassed. Don't be blaming yourself for this stuff. You happen to be unlucky enough to rope into, an alienator, a narcissist, someone
It can happen to
that's a
anybody.
sociopath.
They're
Exactly.
they're very good.
Right. And you can never spot them because they have this mask of deception that they have up on their face, and they cinch it up so close that you can't recognize them. And it's only at the point that they're about to lose the control over you through divorce or separation that mask really starts to slip down, and they reveal themselves for who they really are.
Yes. Um, when I'm talking to someone who's anticipating leaving a narcissist, I always advise them, you haven't seen anything yet. You think this person's a monster now?
Mhm.
Wait. until it becomes a legal battle. Just wait. You haven't seen anything. And most people will say, "Oh no, he or she would never do that. They're never going to hurt me. They're never going to hurt the children." And I'm like, "Yeah, they will. They will." And people are like, "Nah, not mine. You don't know mine." I'm like, "I know all of them."
Hmm.
It's all the way across the board. They get vicious.
They
Uh,
do.
mhm. So you never adopted your stepson, yet you were awarded custody of him?
I was, because I'd raised him since right before he was 2 years old up until the time of the abduction. By then he was 8 years old. And
Wow.
so I was awarded back in 2009. I was awarded the title of psychological parent because I was the only father figure that he'd ever known, because his real father had died before he was even born. And
And
so, because the courts had named me that, once it came time for modification of parental responsibilities, they included him in it.
wow, that's amazing because that doesn't always happen. If you don't have a formal adoption of the child, it's often difficult to get the court to side, to be on your side,
Right.
side in your
But
behalf.
well, that goes back to that judge. He award makes me psychological parent, but yet he's going, well, you know what? You can't have either of the children. I'm giving them back to the mom. It's kind of like, gee, how does that work? You scratch your head at some of the reasoning and decisions of these judges.
I know.
You know,
It's people going through this really need professional help. They really need to talk to people who've experienced it and know how to guide them through this because you will get it wrong. There's nothing logical. It's all counterintuitive. If
hmm
you navigate this process using logic, you're going to get it all wrong and you're going to be
hmm
really sorry.
right. You
So,
know,
what would you say to, because I know the indoctrination begins long before the abduction or the alienation happens. It's done for a long period of time. What would you say to parents who are staying in abusive marriages for the children?
get out, run for the hills as fast as you can. Because all you're doing is creating a worse environment, and not just for yourself, but also for your children. Because what's happening here, part of the alienation process begins even when you're still married. A lot of folks don't recognize this, but when your spouse is belittling you, starting initiating arguments in front of the children, or bad mouthing you behind your back to the children, that's where the alienation process begins. It just intensifies after you guys are no longer living together. So your best bet is get out of it, because you're going to cut that part out as far as the bad belittling you in front of the children, the arguments. They don't need to hear all this nonsense.
Exactly. Um, when you're married to an abuser, there's no way to stay. You have to go, and especially if there's children. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's not about keeping the children in an intact family because you don't have an intact family. That's an illusion. It's not really there. And it's never going to get better, but it's guaranteed to get worse.
It will. And you know what? One thing that, depending on the severity of it, I mean, let's face it, all couples have arguments, right? You've had arguments with your spouse. I've had it with mine. Everybody in the world does. That's accepted, But when it goes to from family arguments into abusive arguments, or abuse in general, be it emotionally, mentally, psychologically, and in some cases even physically, and that you're the good parent, you still want your children to be in their lives, but yet when you recognize all these signs, you need to pick up the phone and call the police and file a report for this type of domestic abuse. You know, men are just as much victims as what the women are. The women,
Absolutely.
but they're too embarrassed. It's like, oh, I'm a guy. I should never call the police and say that my 5'2" wife just yelled at me and called me names or hit me. You know, they're just as much a victim as the women are. And if the women are experiencing this, call them. If you know your marriage is over and you feel that they're going to try to do everything to destroy your relationship with your children, get some backup. Call the cops.
Mhm. It's good to have the police reports. In many cases, when the targeted parent, the good spouse, however we want to call that person, if they call the police, the narcissist will turn it around and the parent who calls ends up getting arrested. I've seen this so many times. So you've got to make sure you're in a situation where you can't be then accused, because I've seen they will throw their head into walls and bang it and get bruises. They will break limbs. They'll do anything to make you look
Mm-hmm.
like you're the abuser, and it can get really out of hand. So, all in all, don't wait for this to happen. If you're seeing that you're being emotionally, mentally, psychologically abused, and physical is obvious, the emotional abuse is not obvious. But let me tell you something, it's worse, because you don't even know it's happening to you. You have no idea you're being abused and brainwashed. You don't know. So you're functioning like you're yourself, but you're really not. You're really not. So if somebody is planning to, or contemplating leaving a marriage with a narcissist, let's say, because they are going to be alienators, if there's children, is there anything that you can do with the children to protect them from what's going to happen when they spend time with that parent?
Yes, there is. There's a number of things that I actually encourage folks to do. When you see this going on, now, not all states allow it, but I know in Colorado and many states, it's a one person authorization where you can actually record your conversation with someone else, and it is admissible in the court of law. But you have to find out what the laws are regarding this type of admissible, recording in the courts. Now, the next thing you want to do is save all of your emails, because I know that some people, when they're in the argumentative stage and they're trying to separate themselves, even living in the same house, instead of arguing, they'll go ahead and email each other back and forth and saying, well, this, you really made me mad today. And you know what? I think you're a jerk. I think that, whatever. Keep all those emails. What you send them, what you receive from them, same thing with all your text messages. Now, if you're already out of the house, you want to go ahead and keep it. Well, actually, even while you're in the house, you want to keep a journal of everything that's transpiring. Just so you can keep it fresh in your mind. You can let the authorities know what's happening. You can let the courts know about it along with your attorney. But after you leave the house, let's say you're granted certain visitation rights. Don't go there by yourself. Instead, choose a place to meet that's public and you meet there, but have someone else with you as a witness to whatever may or may not transpire until things get settled and stuff. So
Is
there
there
are a number of ways to protect yourself.
is there any way to, other than recording or keeping a record of the incidents, is there any way to prep the children mentally, psychologically, for um, for the manipulation they're about to experience? Because narcissists will use guilt, and they generally will choose a very sensitive child and really make that child feel responsible for them. And it's real hard. to break that child from that feeling that they must take care of the parent. So, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. First thing is that don't become the same type of person that hates you, the narcissist or the alienator or whatever they are. Don't stoop to their level by bad mouthing the other parent. They already hear enough of it about you. They don't need to hear it from the parent that loves them the most. All right. So either don't talk about the other parent or whatever, but at the same time, constantly remind your child that, hey, you know what? No matter what happens, I'm still your mom. I'm still your dad. I love you. And I'm always going to be here for you for whatever reason that you may need me. Don't be afraid to come to me when you need something, whether you just want to talk, whether you want to have a problem, whatever. If you have a concern on your mind, I'm here for you. Now, one of the things there, I've got a friend of mine. Her name is Carla Lee over there in Australia. She runs a deal for alienated children. And I remember several years ago, Carla had mentioned there, and she even posted on her website that I thought was brilliant. I wish I had known about it earlier on. But she says one thing you can do, you may not get your children back in the time frame that you want. It may be into the adult stages. However, take yourself a shoebox, cut a hole in the lid, and much like a postal box, every holiday, every Christmas, every birthday, get a card, write it. You know what you're going to put in there, and put their name on it and who it's from and the date, and put it in that shoebox. And when the time comes, you can take that shoebox full of all those cards and letters you've been saving up, and you can give them to your child and let them know that, you know what, all these years you thought I forgot about you and didn't love you. Here, I want you to have this now.
I love that. I think one of the things that parents in these situations, what they tend to do because they think it's going to help, is they feel victimized and they tend to blame the child. Why are you doing this to me? Don't you love me? I love you. I've always loved you. He doesn't love you. She doesn't love you, but I love you. What are you doing? You're breaking my heart. All of these kind of things. And writing these long letters to the kids and, trying to reason with them. But that's not the way to approach it. The way to approach it is to be completely focused on the child's needs, like you're saying. Don't say you're hurting me or why are you doing this to me? Like you said, Dave, you say, I'm here for you. I will always be here for you. You can come to me at any time with anything and keep it like that. Because if you start focusing on yourself, you're going to lose them. You push them further away,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Exactly. I mean, it's got to be about the children. And the thing is, what a lot of parents don't seem to understand is they think, okay, the alienator's done their job. My child hates me. They're screaming at me. They're calling me names. They're doing all this stuff. I'm going to tell them right now, your children don't hate you. You have to understand what the children have gone through with the alienator. You know, um, they're very much controlled by the alienator. They're being fed all these vicious lies about you. When they're acting out in an abusive manner towards you, it's not through hate. It's because they want to know that someone loves them. Because they know deep inside the alienator does not love them.
Mhm.
So they're when they doing this, it's more of a challenge to you as the loving parent. They're going, hey, if you love me so much, prove it. And so it's up to you to rebuttal that. Don't come off and, like most people, okay, you're yelling at me, you're calling me names. I'm going to get ballistic back. Don't. Understand where they're coming from. Talk to them in a reasonable manner and say, I don't know where this anger is coming from, which we obviously do, but that's not what you're going to tell the children. I don't know where this anger is coming from, but just know that I'm here for you, and I love you.
And that's not going to be an instantaneous, you're not going to get an instantaneous result necessarily, but that
No.
message needs to be consistent.
It does.
because that you are, I mean, what you said is absolutely right, Dave. They know who loves them, they know who doesn't, and they have to work harder for the one who doesn't love them.
Right.
They know, even if they're alienating you and they won't talk to you, they still know you love them.
Right. And they just want you to prove to them because the alienator has already proven they don't really love them, that it's just a false love,
Right.
and so they need someone to prove to them that I'm worthy of someone's love, you know. And so you're right. It's not an overnight fix. It's going to take time. It's going to, it could take years.
Hmm. Yeah, it can. So let's talk about the left behind parent.
Mhm.
And how, I know that parental alienation is epidemic, it's everywhere. How common is the left behind parent or the abduction?
Actually, more prevalent than what you'd realize. I
Really?
know in these parental abductions happen all the time. Tens of thousands of children just in the U.S. alone are abducted by one parent or the other. They're taken across town, taken across state lines, whatever. Internationally speaking, it's a little under 1,000 people, which 1,000 children, I should say, that are abducted to another country. Now, arriving at this, it's less than 1,000. That's only for the ones that are reported, because there is, for every child that's abducted internationally, there's another one that's not reported by the left behind parent. So it's actually more prevalent than what you might think nationally and internationally. I mean, I think I read, if I'm not mistaken, there was annually in the United States, there's upwards of 80,000 children abducted each year in the U.S. Alarming, and our laws aren't toughening up enough to do something about it. Now, it's funny you should bring that up. I did one of my YouTube videos that I outline a lot of information, not just for international abductions, but also for national, and outlines what you need to do before it happens, when it happens, and after it happens. And it's called, if you go to YouTube, Options of a Left Behind Parent.
Okay, great.
And it even puts up there who you need to contact, be it local law enforcement, the FBI, the Hague Convention, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So it's got all the resources that you need in app
Mhm.
for an instance of abduction.
Right. And always keep, make sure that you have the birth certificates and passports in your, that you can access them. Never let the other, one parent should not have this complete access to it. You need to, because if, if they have the passports and you don't, that they
Well,
can,
exactly. And that's what I explained in the video that I was just mentioning. Keep copies of everything for law enforcement purposes. You want to know the age of your child, their birth date, their hair color, their height, their weight, all that stuff, but also have copies of their passport, their birth certificate, anything, and then also keep a journal of what you see that is happening. If you suspect it may occur, keep a journal in addition to those things that you want to have on hand.
hmm.
Now, the other thing about it is you want to have a copy of all the contacts that your spouse has, be it family, be it friends, be it people that they know from another state, internationally, whatever. Because the more you can give law enforcement, the better your chances that they can retrieve your child quickly. You know, but if they don't know where to look, it's like, gee, where do I start?
That's really, really important. Really good point. Did your ex-wife have their passports, or was she able to just get them out without them?
My no, actually, what had happened was that when it came time for the birth of my daughter, obviously we'd gotten passports. She was able to get a passport from where my daughter was, and my stepson already had a passport because they were born overseas, but they had to be able to get back to the United States.
They were. They were born overseas?
Yeah,
Okay.
but raised here,
Where was your daughter born?
Australia.
Okay. But that's your daughter, right?
Correct.
Now, did she give birth to your daughter in Australia, or did she have, that's what happened?
Yeah. We were living in Montana at the time, and because we didn't have health insurance, it was cheaper to send her back to Australia to give birth to my daughter, um, because the government over there would have taken care of all the expenses. We did that. She came back, um, and I got her registered as a dual national, you know,
Wow. So you never saw that baby until she brought it back.
which was right after the birth, a few weeks later, when
Wow.
my baby was able to travel.
Jeez. You know, I'm sure if you could retrace your steps, you would see a lot of things that you could have changed, but you can't. You can't. You have to deal with what is right now.
Yeah, and here's the thing about this is that if I could change things, yeah, would I become the man that I am today? No. For that respect, I look at this. Geez, I could have had my children in my life sooner if I'd have just called the police and had her arrested at the time of the abduction, and I wouldn't be going through all this. However, because of everything that's happened, I've now been able to find out that, well, before it actually happened, I never even knew what the term parental alienation or parental abduction were. And when I did, it's like, nah, these things happen to other people. They don't happen to me. You know, but so I learned these terms, and I learned how much it affects other people from all over the world, and so it allowed me to reach out and touch people through my reflective article writings. Allowed me to write that book. It allowed me to put up the blog. It allowed me to start up the YouTube videos and connect with people all over. And would I change that? No, because maybe I'll never hear about it most times, but maybe I've changed someone's life or helped them through a bad patch.
Yes, I so get that. And you almost, in these situations, you almost have to make something good out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're going to just wither up and die. I mean, you've got to take the situation and you've got to make something positive out of it. If it's because, chances are it's not going to go your way, but you did the right thing. And how many years have you been doing this activism kind of work?
Since 2016, I was living down there in Panama, Central America at the time. And it was funny because, even though I had sole custody and it took 3 years before the folks overseas decided to start enforcing child support where I was going to start receiving it, well, it got her a little upset and hot under the collar. So she went to the Australian courts and stuff trying to get that dismissed. So while I'm in Panama in 2015, 2016, I attend court hearings over there via telephone. And I tell the judge, I says, here's the deal on this. You guys don't have jurisdiction. You guys relinquished it, didn't accept it. Colorado has jurisdiction of this. I have sole custody of the children. I have valid court orders, and all this other stuff. You know what the judge did? She said, I don't care. She's got physical custody of the kids. You might have legal custody, but she's got physical custody. I said, yeah, because she's holding them illegally. She said, I don't care. I'm not going to make her pay child support anymore. Well, I'm like, oh my God. And so I'm scratching my head again, like I did with that first judge. It's like, what kind of drugs are you taking to make you rule against the law?
Hmm.
You know, but there's nothing you can do about it. You can try to appeal it, and it'll cost you another 5 or 10 thousand. So I wound up had to accept what she did, and but it made me very angry, and that's where all this stuff started happening. I was actually, for lack of a better term, I was pissed off. And it's like, you know what? I'm not going to stand it for it anymore. I'm going to let the world know what's happening. But instead of doing that, I started writing these reflection articles. And as I started writing them, I come to find out that these things I was writing were nothing more than a mirror to what other folks are feeling and
Right.
experiencing and things like that. And so I started gaining a following all over. So that's what started this activism stuff. So I can thank the ex-wife for that,
Mhm.
you know, for doing all this. And no, it's not over. I'm still now. She's trying to come after me all these years later. After my daughter came back, she's trying to get me to have to pay child support, backdating it. So I have to go back.
How old are these kids now?
Oh, they're aged out, but she wants to go back to 2000 and 11. You know, when I was awarded sole custody. So I've got that court hearing coming up next month again. Um, and it's like crazy.
She just wants to
So,
keep hassling you, harassing you, and making you have to pay.
well, these people, you have to understand the two biggest things that they enjoy in life. Okay, number one, it's the money. They all have that commonality that they have to have money. They don't care where it comes from. It can come from the government, come from the job. It can come from screwing people out of their money by not paying their bills. It can come from their former spouse, which they like more than anything because it allows them to get revenge over a failed relationship and put the screws to them harder because they love to see you squirm. But also, it's another way of, like we were talking earlier, it's a way of regaining and maintaining a certain level of control over their former spouse, which in this case is mental and emotional, but also financially.
Yeah, financial's a big part of it. It's what keeps people stuck in these relationships,
Mm-hmm,
which
mm-hmm.
really aren't relationships. I call them emotional hostage situations because they're not relationships that you have with these people. Um, this is horrific, and children are never the same after this. Even
No,
if you
they're
get
not.
them back,
Well, that's the bad part about it. And if the courts would wake up and smell the coffee, they'll realize what alienation is and accept the term alienation, parental alienation, and then educate themselves on when they rule erroneously the effects on the children of the alienation. Because let's face it, depending upon the level of alienation that's going on, it could be mild, it could be medium level, it could be extreme. And it also depends on how many years it's been going on, what timeline. Well, the children that are experiencing this, it confuses them and they're having to search out their own self being. So it could be that they, will react with temper tantrums because they're frustrated over the situation. It can go into rebellion against authority figures, earlier than normal sexual exploration, drug and alcohol abuse. It can even, I read a report here, though it didn't get into specifics, that what is it? 80% of the people that are incarcerated in the United States come from a single parent home at one point in their life. Now, it never got into whether they were an alienated child or what. It just said, so that's the importance of having two parents in a child's life. But, also the other thing about being alienated is that these children, they grow up thinking that what's their parent has been doing to the other parent is normal and accepted. So they wind up bringing these same, things into their future relationships because they think it's normal. So the cycle repeats itself.
that is so true. What a great point. So, for those who are listening and want to reach out to you, how do they go ahead and do that?
Well, the easiest way, because I know everyone's on it, they can go to Facebook. So I'm on that facebook.com/hopeful father, or they can go to the blog, which is a parentingaffair.com. But they can also even go to YouTube and watch some of the videos, which I'm kind of a novice on that. So it much like yourself, you didn't start off perfect when you got in front of the camera. But they can go to a parenting affair on YouTube on that, or
Okay,
even LinkedIn for that matter.
right. And if they write to you, you'll write back, right?
Oh, I do. Fact is, I have someone this morning that wants to touch base with me. Um, I said, well, after the podcast, I'll go ahead and get with you. Just go ahead and send me over the information and stuff. And I gave her my email address for a parenting affair. So
Okay,
when they do reach out and say, "Hey, I need to talk to you," or "Can you do whatever," I always am there.
that's great. And your book, is that on Amazon and or is it just through your website?
No, it's on Amazon. It's if they type in "stolen memories" and in my name, David R. Shubert, and that's Shubert,
Okay.
David R. Shubert, stolen memories. They'll find it, and they can do it in ebook. They can do it in paperback. They can do it in hardcover. And I've got someone who wants to take it into audio. But now here's the thing about it: with that ebook version, there's a promotion that starts up on Monday.
Hmm.
$1.99 for the
Oh,
ebook, and it's going to go on for just 1 week.
okay. Well, that's real. I'm glad that we were able to catch that here for anybody that's listening. That's good. Okay, guys, listeners, go out and get a book. You can't beat $1.99. Can't get anything for less than that. So Dave, thank you. It's really been great chatting with you, and you have such important things to tell people. You have a lot of great advice and great tips, and it's important that people going through this don't feel like they're alone. They are not alone. They don't realize it, but knowing that you're there, that they can talk to you or read what you write, or just have that comfort is just uh, such a great feeling for people. So I thank you for being my guest today. Really great show.
Thank you for having me.
So, all right, we'll be talking, I'm sure.